All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about how just a handful of words, one single sentence from a world leader, can kick off a $30 billion crisis. And this isn't just some political oopsie. No, this is a self-inflicted wound that could derail Japan's entire economic recovery.
And boom, there it is. That's the sentence. Now, you might read that and think, okay, sounds like a pretty standard show of strength. But in the incredibly delicate dance of East Asian geopolitics, well, those words were nothing short of an earthquake.
So that's the big question, right? How on earth did we get from that one single declaration to a massive economic and political firestorm, a firestorm that is now threatening to swallow the prime minister's entire career?
Okay, to really get why this was such a big deal, we have to talk about what Prime Minister Takaichi's statement completely shattered. Now, she's known as a staunch nationalist, a real hawk in her party, so this was probably a very calculated move to look tough. But in doing that, she just blew up a security policy that Japan has spent decades building, a policy based on a super delicate balancing act. And this was the name of the game, strategic ambiguity. For decades, this was the golden rule. The idea was simple. Be just clear enough that your allies know you have their back, but be vague enough that you don't draw a red line that forces your opponents into a corner. I mean, it was a work of art, really, a masterpiece of diplomatic caution.
And then, with just a few words, she took that whole carefully crafted strategy and chucked it right out the window. Just like that. The ambiguity? Gone. Replaced with a crystal clear, unmistakable commitment. And you can bet Beijing was listening.
So China's response came fast. But they didn't send warships or scramble fighter jets. No, they went for something far more powerful in today's world, their economic weapon, and they aimed it right at Japan's most vulnerable spot.
I mean, just look at this number to understand the scale of Japan's exposure here. 8.2 million people. These weren't just tourists. They were the absolute lifeblood of Japan's post-pandemic economic comeback. And then, just like that, Beijing turned off the tap. They issued an informal travel ban, and bam, a $1.2 billion hole just appears out of nowhere. We're talking airports turning into ghost towns, hotels emptying out overnight, and thousands of jobs suddenly on the line.
And this wasn't just a one-time hit. The pain started to spread. For 4 straight months, exports to China just kept falling. This wasn't a blip on the radar, you guys. This was the beginning of a real structural slowdown, a sustained economic squeeze. And this chart, wow, it tells the whole story, doesn't it? Just look at that massive gap between what they were hoping for and the grim new reality after her statement. We're talking about cities like Osaka and Okinawa, places that had bet their entire future on tourism, now staring down the barrel of economic disaster.
And the damage just kept rippling out from there. It wasn't just tourism. Suddenly, seafood exports were getting canceled. Manufacturing contracts were put on ice. And maybe the most damaging thing of all, big multinational companies started hitting the brakes on investments, completely spooked by all this new political risk.
So, as the economy starts to crack, you'd think the political ground under her would be cracking too, right? But this is where the story gets really interesting and kind of paradoxical.
Get this, her approval rating actually went up.
Yeah, the public looked at her and saw a strong, decisive leader standing up for Japan. But that popularity, it was like a mask, hiding a much, much more dangerous reality that was brewing just beneath the surface. And this really gets to the heart of the paradox. On the one hand, her public image was soaring. She looked tough, decisive. But the reality inside her own party, the LDP, support was crumbling. Her strength on the outside was hiding this incredible fragility on the inside. And that fragility, well, it didn't stay hidden for long. It exploded into a full-blown rebellion. You had street protests, which is pretty rare in Japan, popping up. The moderate wing of her party, the folks with deep business ties to China, they were getting seriously nervous. And it wasn't long before senior party members started openly whispering, maybe it's time for a change. So you have to ask, how did it all go so spectacularly wrong? Because this wasn't just about one controversial sentence. This was a catastrophic, top-to-bottom failure to plan for the totally predictable consequences. Really, you can boil this entire mess down to 3 critical miscalculations. First, there was zero diplomatic groundwork. She didn't coordinate with her allies before dropping this bombshell. Second, she had no economic shield.
Japan's economy was left wide open for a retaliation that everyone knew was coming. And third, she completely lost control of the narrative, allowing China to paint Japan as the bad guy, the sole provocateur. She basically walked right into a trap of her own making.
So look, the key takeaway here isn't about debating whether her tough stance was right or wrong. That's not the point. The point is that she made this huge declaration of intent without any of the strategic planning needed to back it up. She left her country completely exposed. And all of this leads us to the final, high-stakes question. After personally triggering this crisis, can her leadership actually survive it? At the end of the day, her political survival really comes down to this one simple fact. For the average person in Japan who's already struggling with inflation and a shaky economy, geopolitics feels a million miles away. What do they care about? Jobs, the cost of living. Their wallet is priority number one.
And that right there is the fundamental clash she's facing. Her big priority is national security and projecting strength. But for the people, their priority is economic stability. And right now, her agenda is seen as a direct threat to the thing they care about most. This timeline really lays out how precarious her situation is. The pressure is building, fast. And the consensus among experts is that if the economy doesn't start to turn around, and soon, that internal push from her own party to replace her is going to become unstoppable. The clock is ticking. And this really is the key to understanding how politics works in Japan. Public popularity is great, but it can only get you so far. The real power, the kingmakers, they're inside the party. And it's that internal support, that foundation, that Takaichi has completely lost. So she set out to project strength, but what she actually did was reveal a deep, critical vulnerability, both in Japan's economy and in her own political strategy. And that leaves us with the final unavoidable question. Will the ultimate price for that one single sentence be her own career